So thank you very much for talking to us again today, Bob. How's life up in the Northern Hemisphere?
Well, it's like it is in the Southern Hemisphere, except multiplied times many, many, many times. My country is not doing very well. We're opened up for business and all that. Because of my age and because of the age of my fan base for the Rainmakers, we have been exceedingly cautious.
Yeah.
And we hadn't played in 20 months until last Friday. We finally had a show, and it was outdoors and it was on a great big lawn. So when we didn't have a rehearsal, we just showed up and played, and it's all right. It's all right in here in the fingers and the head. And it actually went just fine. People were masked and distanced, and so it was as good as it could be. Now I've had a lot of solo shows canceled this fall. I thought if I waited until August, I would certainly be safe. We all thought that, didn't we? So I've had to cancel about 2 months of work, and probably will cancel another month of work.
Oh dear.
So it goes on. It's madness. It's just madness.
So I've seen the live stream of the show, and you say you hadn't rehearsed. You sounded pretty decent. How did it feel? Well,
it felt a bit surreal in that it had been long enough since we had played that all of a sudden you're there, and the volume is happening, and people are responding, and the lights are in your eyes, and it just feels like you're dreaming. It was very disconnected, not from the music or the people or the band members, just kind of from reality. I think when you spend that much time, like I said, my wife and I have been very careful about isolation, even after getting vaccinated. So all of a sudden you're immersed in a bunch of people and a bunch of noise and songs. But, luckily we have played these songs enough times that it becomes muscle memory. And that thing, if you know the lyrics of a song, as long as you don't think of them, the next words will come out just fine. If you stop and think, what's the next line? Then you forget it. But no, I didn't forget any words. It all came out okay.
No, I didn't hear too many bump notes. I mean, and you sounded tight enough. But more than anything, you sounded like a band that were having fun together.
Well, and that's always been the core of what the Rainmakers have been about, is to make simple music, but simple music that has these layers of intelligence or humor or thoughtfulness, but propelled by that energy of rock and roll that is about having fun, about the kinetic energy of people being together and sharing music.
Yeah, like I say, it seemed good fun. Let me ask you a very quick question about the set list, though. I was curious to notice. I mean, you're not pushing a new album, obviously, and so you sort of played sort of a greatest hits collection. What's happened to Skin?
Well, of the 4 band members right now, only 2 of us played on Skin. Rich Ruth did not participate in that, and he has said to this day he's never listened to that record. So, and it's an artful record that I'm very proud of, and there are many people that I have talked to who that album about sexual politics, about a pornographic society, about all the pressures on women and on men to have certain roles, to live up to certain physical standards, that all that subject matter connected with people at a time when they needed it. It didn't connect with everyone, but the people who did need to hear that subject, it meant a lot to them. It's a hard record to play live. I mean, I do some of those songs solo.
Yeah.
But the seriousness, the darkness of a lot of those songs are kind of hard to fit in between Let My People Go and Hootie Hoo,
Yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah, it's fair enough. But I mean, I would have loved to have heard you have a quick swing at Redleman Coming. That remains one of my favourite songs. But yeah, I can see how it wouldn't fit in effortlessly. So what else is going on with you? I mean, I know the Rainmakers don't have a new album out, but there's one Rainmaker who does.
Well, 2 Rainmakers do. Jeff Porter has a new album out too. I have never had a problem staying busy. I've never been one to get bored.
Right.
That has its good parts and its bad parts. I do pretty well in isolation, which is sometimes hard on the people around you when you're an artist, when you're just like, hey, as long as I have my guitar and my pencil and paper and a set of paints, I'm good, man. You know, I can always find something to do. Also this year, or this past year, as the pandemic set in early 2020, I did something that I always had wanted to do, but never had the time to do, is I decided I would try my hand at actually writing some stories.
Right.
And so that was, it's like, well, that took up a chunk of the pandemic for me. Learning, I have to say, learning how to write long form, learning how to write stories rather than songs. Songs are all about saying the most with the least amount of words.
Right.
Whereas stories, it's like totally the other way around. It's like almost saying the least with the most amount of words. You're just stretching out pictures. You're not necessarily making a statement. You're just drawing pictures, and you're drawing time. And learning how to do that was really kind of an inverse from songwriting for me. But I really enjoyed it. It was really tiring. It was a lot hard. I have several writer friends, several mystery writers and crime writing friends, and I respect them even more. It's hard work. At least it was for me.
Well, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you've been the narrator on some of the audiobooks, haven't you?
Yeah, I like I said, I have this friend that's a crime writer, and so I did some of his audiobooks, but that takes even longer than writing the damn thing. So, so I kind of retired from audiobook production.
Well, tell us a little bit about the book's called Whirlybird Day, yeah?
Yeah.
What genre? I haven't had a chance to get hold of a copy, unfortunately. Deliveries are very slow here. Tell us a bit about what genre are we looking at here?
Well, you can get it as an ebook, and you can also get it as an audiobook of me reading it to you. So,
oh, how fantastic!
So you got no excuse. I'll read you to sleep at night, Steve. I grew up in a small farming community about an hour east of Kansas City. And, you know, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, which, you know, was kind of a culturally, for some people, you know, kind of an age of innocence and change. And being a child during that time, it's the only time I know, but there were so many layers to this small town. I mean, the town that I grew up in was less than 1,000 people. But we didn't go anywhere. We just stayed right there. And so this was my whole universe. So I went back and wrote what I remembered, what I learned, and I fictionalized. I turned it into little self-contained stories of people. A couple of them real, but most of them combinations of people that I knew, and points and lessons and observations that I've carried with me through my life. As I have lived in bigger cities and traveled to a lot of places, that perspective that I grew up with of being in a small town has stuck with me. It's given me a certain viewpoint on the world. And so I was trying to write about that, but not from where I am now, but from where I was back then, and looking out at the world and kind of knowing what might be waiting for me.
Oh, sounds good. So semi-memoir-ish?
Only semi, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Bob doesn't appear, but a lot of little parts of Bob appear, and parts of my parents appear, and parts of my friends and ministers that I knew, and musicians I have known, local musicians. Yeah, it's I feel, you know, after I put it out about a year ago, almost a year ago. Sometimes, like with songs, you'll write and record one, and then a year later you hate it. You think, oh my God, what was I thinking? But now I feel pretty good about these stories. So yeah, Whirlybird Day, check it out.
Great. Is this going to be the first of many, or is this a one-off, do we think?
I think it's a one-off thing. I may change my mind in a while, but it didn't have the. It was a lot more work than music. Of course, I've been doing music a lot longer, so I kind of know how to do that. I didn't know what I was doing here. I could write really good for about 15 minutes, and then I had to lay down for about 10 minutes. So yeah, it really was a different kind of mental exercise. Did you find
yourself wanting to write song lyrics as you were writing the prose? Did that sort of like the two sort of overlap a little bit?
No, not really. In fact, very different. They said they're very. I think the actual mechanism in your mind
Yeah.
that creates one or the other are almost opposed to each other.
Yeah, fair enough. So will I recognise any characters from any of your songs when I read it?
No.
Is the Lakeview Man in there, for example?
No, not really. And I had some friends who I was in communication with about while I was writing who said, well, you should weave this into songs. No,
Right.
I did. It was two separate worlds. Although there are a few lines here and there that if someone knows Rainmakers songs really well, there's a few little what do you call them, Easter eggs in there.
Oh, right.
Like, oh, there's a phrase. I've heard that phrase before.
Right, fair enough. Well, I know Stephen King has quoted your lyrics before now, so I was just wondering if there's not a temptation to drop one or two of your own in there. Not so much.
Yeah. Well, I don't really quote me. I just kind of there's little glimpses of imagery that I think Rainmakers fans will make the connection.
Fair enough. Now, last time we spoke a year ago, we talked about the possibility of a new Rainmakers album. And I know you just released Cover Band, which obviously, because it wasn't your material, doesn't sound like a Rainmakers album so much. But obviously, you're still writing material. Is there going to be another Rainmakers album, do we think, or are we just a live band at this stage?
I think just a live band.
Yeah.
You know, the Rainmakers' position in the world and in my world is a strange little position among a group of loyal and very thinly scattered people around the world. You know, we're a band that meant something to them.
Right.
But we can't go out and tour all over. We can't even go around tour the U.S. We don't have enough of a fan base out there to make that feasible. As you probably know, we over the past decade have gone back to Norway over and over because that was a concentrated area where we had, for some reason, even though it's a small population there, we connected with enough people that we could go over there and tour for 2 weeks.
Right.
That we did that for about a decade, a little, 6 years or something like that, and I think that actually also ran its course. We kind of went back to that well as many times as felt comfortable. And I think you also just have to be realistic about the physicality of it. And are you enjoying this or not? I mean, I'm 68 years old now. I think our last full tour was when I was 65, I think.
Okay.
And while I'm in physically good shape, and, God bless Mick and Keith and Paul McCartney and all those guys that still go out there and do 2 and 3 hour shows, they're not carrying their own shit all over some country. They're not getting up at 6 a.m. to get on the train. So, so the physical part of it, I hit a point where I was like, this is not fun. This is I can't, the balance of the physical demands and the fun rewards, or even the monetary rewards, weren't in balance anymore. But I'm glad we had that chapter. I mean, we didn't expect, when the Rainmakers broke up in '98, I didn't expect there to be this other chapter that started in 2011. So it was all gravy. It was like we got to put the band back together, one different member, and just fell right back into it. And I think made 3 really good records, 3 new records, played a lot, and I was glad to be able to do that. And we actually had a farewell in Norway in 2019. We said, nope, this is it, folks. Thanks so much. We mean it. When we say goodbye, we're saying goodbye.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of saying goodbye, you mentioned that there's one new member, so I think we have to mention briefly the one member who's no longer with us.
Yeah, about a year ago, Steve Phillips, our original guitar player, passed away. Complications from a genetic breathing disorder he had, and then he got COVID on top of it. And so he had been struggling for months and had kept it really secret. I didn't even know about it. And he and I had been in touch a lot. We had not talked a lot over the years, now and then. And we had invited him when the Rainmakers reformed in 2011. We had invited Steve to to be part of that, but he was real busy with his band, the Elders, and he said, I can't do it. So that's how Jeff Porter ended up in the band. And for both Steve and the Elders and us and the Rainmakers, it all worked out for everyone's best advantage. But yeah, Steve's passing caught the Kansas City music community very much by surprise, as it did kind of the international community of Rainmakers and Elders fans who loved Steve's guitar playing and his songwriting. Yeah, it was a very sudden, it was a bit like Charlie Watts this past week. You knew he was sick, you didn't know he was that sick.
Right.
So yeah, and it is, yeah, I look back on the bands that I grew up with, the Beach Boys. Well, this brother dies and that brother dies, and the Rolling Stones, Brian Jones dies. Oh, what do you know? Charlie Watts dies. To actually have one of your band members, that reunion won't happen again.
Right.
It changes your reality. It changes your possibilities, and it changes your memory too. These memories are defined. There will be no more.
Right.
Steve was a great guy to be in a band with. A really good guitar player. Yeah. He and I. I wrote a song for him after he passed away, and the first line is, "We butted heads like good brothers do." I think that's sometimes in a band that's part of the chemistry that works, is when you have two people that butt heads a bit. You bring out the best in each other because you're going to prove to that son of a bitch that you know what you mean. And so, yeah, we would work on songs or arrangements or mixes and disagree till finally we got it to something that both of us could live with. And I think that brought out the best of both of us. We drove each other crazy sometimes, but that's art for you. It takes a struggle.
But I guess just like the Rolling Stones always had a Keith song on most albums, Steve would take a song as well, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and that I think that there we had one album where he had two songs, and that fit him about right. Steve, at least at that point in his life, was not a prolific songwriter. Right. He wrote, a few songs, and they were really good, and having a break where you didn't have to listen to my twangy voice was probably good for the context of the album.
Nah, fair enough. Hey, listen, since we're mentioning the Rolling Stones, now you obviously were a drummer yourself originally, as we've talked about in the past. A drummer yourself. Yeah. So I guess Charlie Watts passing probably hit you quite hard.
It did, in that your heroes, you're saying goodbye to your heroes as each one goes on their way, and so much has been said about Charlie Watts's drumming, and my little part of it is he could play really complicated. I mean, he was a jazz drummer, but he knew it's not what was called for in the context of the Rolling Stones, and I wrote a little post on Facebook that I thought one of his most brilliant moments was the drum entrance on "Start Me Up," where it's just bam, except it's backwards. The snare is where the kick should be, the kick is where the snare should be for two beats, and it's like, oh, this is so simple, and I never would have thought of that in a million years. And it was just, but yeah, his drumming had lots of those kind of, the simplicity of it was jaw-dropping. And Neil Peart, all you guys that want to play a million notes, but you'll never do that.
Fair enough. So what else is going on with you at the moment? I see over your shoulders, I see some artwork hanging up.
Yeah, it's painting season around here. I tend to do a couple of art shows in the late fall, November, December. And I didn't last year because I was busy finishing up my book. So I hadn't had an art show for a couple of years, and most of the galleries were closed up. No one was going to galleries. So yes, it's painting time again. But I also, before I totally forget it, I also made an album this year too.
Yes, you did, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I keep forgetting that I did that. It's like, what did I do? Oh yeah, I made an album. I have a presence on Patreon. And I think, most music fans are familiar with Patreon now, where you can subscribe to your to artists that have meant something to you, and support them with a monthly subscription. And
Right.
for my Patreon, I have all these different levels, and I put out a new song every single month, and some kind of video. Sometimes it's a performance video, sometimes it's just kind of pictures and words. But I put out one every month, and so at the end of 2020, I had 12 new songs, and put them together into an album then that was released for sale at all the usual digital outlets. And then I do a little bit of mail order business myself. It's hard to distribute CDs this anymore because not a lot of people buy CDs, and you can't charge a lot for them. So it's kind of a fan thing. You know, they want to have the physical object, and they want to have it signed. And so when I ever get out to play live again, I will be selling CDs.
I'm glad to hear you saying when, not if. So I've got a quick listen.
It's not if, man. If it's if, we're all screwed.
Yeah, but so the album's 1,000 words, and the opening song is called "Happy Enough," and the tone of that song doesn't sound like the happiest voice I've ever heard.
Well, it's a pretty playful song. There's a lot of good, it's not a linear song. I mean, it doesn't really tell you a story. It just throws out all these fun combinations of words. So actually, I think you could tell that I'm happy. That was the first song I made when Patreon kicked in and I started this song a month thing. That actually was the first song I did.
Right.
And I had been making a point as I've reached my golden years, as have so many of my musical acquaintances. I made a point to have coffee with a lot of people that I only peripherally knew, that I only kind of, I'd been around them in Kansas City for decades, but had never had a chance to sit down and have a conversation. So I kind of made it a point to sit down to make these coffee meetings with other musicians in Kansas City. Right. I would eventually work the conversation around to the point where I would ask them, are they happy? With their version of the story. Are you happy? And this one friend of mine pauses and he goes, "I'm happy enough."
There you go.
Yeah. It's just a great line. I mean, again, it's almost like a Charlie Watts thing. It's like two words that say so much. I'm happy enough. So yeah, that was the first song, and it actually is I think it's a pretty happy song. It's got some cynical humor to it, but it's a happy song.
There's a wee bit of a snarl in the voice as well, to be fair.
Oh, there always has been.
Nah, fair enough. Fair enough. Now, one thing that I have to comment on, because you mentioned that you're 68 years old now, and I just you're going to think I'm being rude here. I'm going to go there anyway. The hair's still looking fantastic.
As long as I ignore it, it serves me well.
Fair
Trying
enough.
not to worry about it too much.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the top hat is obviously a thing of the past. Was that really a good idea?
Oh, I think for the Rainmakers' entrance into the world market, coming out with a look, we certainly captured attention, and I still have people ask me where that top hat is, and I'll tell you, it's right over there in a box, all smashed to hell. So fair
enough. I mean,
it doesn't fit my head anymore, though.
Very, very much of the 80s, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think in the 80s, before grunge came around.
Yes.
I think most bands had this attitude that you have to dress differently than your audience. You have to look like you're going to work. You have to look like you're a performer. So we were kind of part of that generation where if you see somebody on stage, they should be dressed for the part.
Yeah, that does sound reasonable, to be fair. Yeah, and I guess the other big project you're working on at the moment is your daughter, Una. Is she Una or Una?
Una.
Una, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, and Una had lived in New Orleans, which I'm glad she doesn't live there now.
No,
she had lived in New Orleans 2016, 2017, and had traveled the country a bit on her own, becoming a songwriter. She's 28 now, and she's been writing good songs since she was about 15. She actually has quite a lot of songs, but her time in New Orleans kind of came to an end, and I said, well, while you have this window of time and I have this window of time, let's try to make some music together. So we set out to make an album, make a group of new songs that were tailor-made for putting our voices together. An
Right,
older male, younger female voice that are genetically connected.
right.
And wrote songs and worked out arrangements for that to be the centerpiece. And it made I'm very proud of the record. You know, she wrote 5 songs, I wrote 5 songs. I get to sing harmony most of the time. I sing lead a few times, but most of the songs that I wrote, I had her sing lead on. And singing harmony is a great joy because it's a bit more acrobatic than singing lead. Lead, you're kind of drilling the point home. Harmony, you're kind of like dancing around that central melody. So getting to sing harmony was which in Rainmakers I don't ever get to do because I'm singing lead. So it was great fun to sing together and to be the harmony singer and to do it with my daughter. I knew this was not her aspiration. You know, she didn't want to be the Judds or you know. So we knew it was just going to kind of be a year-long thing. We did get to play a lot of dates around the Midwest, Kansas City area. And we got to do one tour of Norway, and it went very well. And then, of course, she starts working on her own solo music, and just finishes an EP, and the whole thing shuts down. So, we'll see where music takes her. But yeah, we're on Spotify and all the regular digital outlets. So Bob and Una Walkenhorst.
Absolutely, yes. Well, listen, I'm just conscious of the time here, Bob, because I know you've very graciously given up some of your clearly very, very busy day. Well, the singing, the songwriting, the recording, the writing, and the painting. You've clearly got a lot going on.
Well, actually, today, the very nicest thing today was my wife and I decided to both stop working and go to the art gallery, which we had not done in 2 years.
Oh, wow.
It was a date day, really. We went and had lunch, and we have a very nice art museum in Kansas City, much bigger than most museums for a city the size of Kansas City. A very nice museum. So yeah, we put on our masks and went to the art museum.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sparing us half an hour out of your day. We really appreciate it. And maybe we'll talk to you again another year after your next Rainmaker show, perhaps.
Yeah, we'll hope that more has happened between then and now, you know.
Yeah, well, let's hope you stay safe, mate. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.